Alright guys, so I received the replacement motor and board today in the mail, and this is it right here. So what I'm going to do first, I've removed the weight from the back half here, so it allows me to take the drive shaft up out of the way and force it into the back end of the flywheel here. So the plan is to go ahead and get this motor mounted inside the frame and connect the drive shafts, and then I'll go about wiring up the contacts to the board. So I have another locomotive over here that I'm cheating off of over to my left, another Athearn with the same type of arrangement, just to make sure I get the contacts on the right spot. So it's fairly straightforward. The outside contacts on the front and on the back of the board, I'm going to use a screwdriver here so you don't see my big old fingers in the video, but this contact here and this one here connect to the left and right wheel pickups on the back, and the same with these two contacts in the front. So this wire goes here, this wire in the back goes here. So once I get the motor mounted, I'm going to go ahead and take the board off right now, because it just, again, it clips on top of the motor. Let me show you the old one with those clips right there. So I'm going to unclip it, put the motor inside the frame, and then I'll start attaching the wires to the board. Once I get the wheel pickups attached, I'll go ahead and clip the board onto the motor, and then that way we'll be able to then connect the lights. It's a little bit easier to do with it mounted in the frame. So I'm going to do that first. Okay, so one thing I'm going to do before attaching the motor, I don't know if you can tell on the back of these drive shafts, you can see that sort of tan colored gunk, maybe. This right here, that's factory grease that's kind of worked its way onto the end of the drive shaft, and it's kind of congealed on there. And you can see there's some down here as well. It looks like it's flown off the flywheel. So I've got these alcohol wipes here that I'm going to try and clean that off with. So we'll start with doing that. And luckily it comes off fairly easily. Get down there under the drive shaft. I have to take my screwdriver, clean that out. Alright, so we'll spin this around, do the same on the rear drive shaft. Looks a lot better. And clean this off as well. Sorry if I'm blocking the shot, but you get the idea. Make sure to get all that out of there. Alright, so that looks much better. I'll try and hold that up a bit so you can see it's now clean. So one thing I'm going to do while I'm in here is I'm going to take these gear towers off and take a look at the to see if there's any of that grease accumulated on the gears. So it's fairly easy to do this. You just take the end of a screwdriver and gently pry up on the gear tower, and it comes loose. This looks pretty good. I have used Liberty oil on this locomotive, so I don't see any grease accumulating. I tried to clean all of the grease off when I first got this, so it does look pretty good. Snap this gear tower back on and do the same with the front truck. This one's a little bit trickier because it sits down inside the frame a bit. So I've never broken one of these, but there's always a first time, and I hope it's not on camera. Just like the instructions are always, simply pry off the gear tower. So, it came off. Luckily, it bounced off of me and didn't end up on the floor. So there's a bit of oil down here. So I'm just going to try and clean that out if I can. Oh, I do see some grease up here. I don't know if you can see that in the video, but right here, there's a bunch of grease up on top of this gear. So let's see if we can get that off. Okay, that looks better. I'll try and clean this out here as well. Okay, so something else that you can do is you can actually pull the gears, the worm gear up off of the truck. Just take a look in there. That doesn't look too bad. Let's see if I can wipe some of this off. Alright, so if you've taken the trucks off of an Athearn, you'll notice that they have the square bearings that fit on the edge of the wheel sets that secure the wheel sets into the truck, and the same bearings are used here. So these can sometimes be a little bit fiddly to get back in, because obviously they got to line up and they have to go in correctly. Alright, so that doesn't happen often. Both of them went in the same time. Okay, so the case with oil is less is more. So I'm just going to apply one drop to this worm gear, and that should be plenty. When I looked down inside the truck, there was plenty of oil down in there, so I'm not going to bother trying to drop oil in there as well. Okay. Okay, so gear tower's back on. I'm going to go ahead and stop the video, and I'm going to bolt the motor into the holes in the frame. So I've got to have the frame out of camera shot to do that, so be right back. Alright, so the motor is bolted into the frame now, and in order to get the motor down past the drive shafts, I had to take the gear tower off the back drive shaft, lift it up out, set the motor in, and then slide the drive shaft into the back flywheel. So there's not enough room to do that with the drive shaft in place. The other thing about the motors is that they'll only fit into the frame in one direction. You can see the way that the that the flywheels here are oriented. If you tried to flip the motor around in order for the bolt holes to match up, the shorter end of the motor has to be facing forward here. So you can't get it in the wrong way, because if you turn it around, there's too much length here and it won't fit inside the frame. So one advantage to, at least to how they designed it, it's hard to screw it up. So I'm going to go ahead and snap the gear tower back on. And the other thing is that with these boards that clip onto the motor, you know, obviously once you have them off, you know, they can go on a different way, right? You could flip it around and hook your contacts up to the wrong, hook your wires up to the wrong contacts, and then, you know, you'd be kind of in a bad way there. I guess it would just run the locomotive backwards when it was supposed to be running forwards. I don't know if it would do any other damage, but you know, left and right would be reversed. So how do you know which way it goes? Normally on most of these Athearn boards, the 8-pin connector faces the rear of the locomotive. But if you ever see one where it doesn't, and you're unsure about what pins connect to what wires here, You can just Google Athearn DCC board and you can find wiring diagrams. So that's what I've done. I have one up here on my computer that I'm looking at, and the first thing that I'm going to do is try and get these contacts connected here on the front. I don't know how much of this is going to show in the video, so I may have to take it out of the frame here and do it, but this contact here, which is the left side, is going to go on here, this wire on this contact, right side on this contact. And then I want to do the same with the back. This wire that's sticking out here is, I keep using my fingers to point, it is connected to the bottom contact of the Athearn motor, and I'll show you on the old one how that's connected. So it's just soldered to that contact. So this one connects to this contact here on the right, so that's the lower motor contact. And I think that's normally the orange wire, maybe? Gray. Sorry, it's the gray wire normally. All of these wires are black, but this would be the gray connection here onto the motor. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and we'll see how hard this becomes. I'm going to try and do it on camera here. A lot of guys will solder these connections. That's great. If you want to do that, that's also an option. But I kind of like to use the clips here just in case I, for whatever reason, need to get the board out. So you want to make sure that you don't have any wire protruding out of the contact that may, connect with something you don't want it to connect with. So again, a little fiddly here. Alright, so there's, sorry, I don't know if that was in frame or not. That one's connected. Alright, so one thing that, I don't know if your guys are out there screaming, put on the weight first, but I have to put the back weight on before I can actually attach these connectors here. The wires actually route up through a slot, which you can see right there in the weight. And then they get attached to the DCC board, so I'm going to do that right now. I don't actually have the motor screwed in yet to the frame, so I'm going to wait just a minute to do that. Come on, there we go. All right, so it's should be ready to go. There we go. Alright, so success. Let's go back to the workbench. Alright, so here we are back at the workbench, and the next thing we have to do is attach the lights to the two contacts up front. This is the front of the locomotive, this is the back, and we've got two contacts back here as well. So I'm going to take the DCC board loose again from the top of the motor. Just, it allows you to get a little bit better access to those contacts. Alright, so front headlights. Okay. So now let's get the wires tucked down onto the decoder. Let's make sure these things aren't going to get pinched. And as it always happens, all right, one of the fans got pushed off, so go back to the layout. Excuse me, go back to the layout and test the lights. All right, so that's a good sign. We've got front lights. I'm just gonna turn this to reverse here. We have back lights. All right. Looks like we have light function. Off and on, front and back. We are good to go, guys. All right. So I guess we'll call that a success. Go head back over to the workbench here. So one last comment on this project, and we'll call this a wrap. The reason that I did not use the motor and the DCC board that I had purchased online, you know, the motor that okay, the motor that was in this one I thought worked fine, but I wasn't sure after the short if it had damaged the motor any. So you know, without knowing that, I went ahead and bought the motor and DCC board together. But so anyway, when the motor came, and this is the one I bought online, it was a bit, you know, I mean, it looked okay, but you know, I just wasn't sure that it was going to be better than or as good as the motor that was already in this locomotive originally. So I just went ahead and you know, used the motor that was in there originally. So, and if you guys know Terry from Penn Central 99's channel, if you read any of the comments on the last video where I had shown how this had shorted out, Terry asked me if I needed another board, and you know, and if I did, why he would send it to me, because he had one in his parts bin that he wasn't using. This is not the one he sent me. The one that he sent me is in the locomotive, and this is the one that came, excuse me, with the motor that I bought online. So that being said, I just wanted to give Terry a shout out for being so kind as to send that along to me. You know, he said he wasn't using it, it was in his parts bin, and you know, he basically wanted to get rid of it. So it's in there, it has a new life, it's in this locomotive, and it's working fine with the original motor. And Terry, I appreciate it. Awful nice gesture just to go ahead and send that to me. I really appreciate it. And what that allows me to do now is I have a spare motor and DCC board sitting here that, you know, sometime in the future I might be able to use. And just again, this is the board that came out that had the short right here. And I think I did show this on the other video, but I'm sure this thing is toast. You know, I obviously don't want to put it back in to find out, but and I think I showed this before. Let me get the smaller screwdriver. Right here, you can see all this discoloration. So if we take a good decoder board and we take a look at that, the good one is obviously on the bottom. You know, it's you can see the damage here. You know, and again, this contact has melted. So I'm not sure. You know, obviously I'm not going to try putting this in a locomotive any longer. I'm just going to pitch it. But you know, I've got the spare board now and the spare motor. So if anything else happens to one of my Athearn Locos, I'm ready to go. Again, shout out to Terry. Thank you, sir. I appreciate the gesture. And if you haven't seen Terry's channel, it's Penn Central 99 on YouTube. So head on over there, and if you're not a subscriber already, please subscribe, and you know, show him some love. He does some good videos. So Terry, thanks again. Talk to you soon.